Okay, so this whole OpenClaw story just completely blew up this week. And look, if you think you know what happened just because you starred the repo on GitHub, you are missing the real story. This isn't just some tech drama, it's this high-speed collision of innovation, crime, and corporate warfare that honestly feels like it was ripped straight out of a sci-fi novel. It has been a week of absolute whiplash, Alex, seriously. We've seen this brilliant technical breakthrough, a project that had to change its name not once, but twice, a massive trademark battle with an $18 billion AI giant, and a crypto scam that basically materialized out of thin air and siphoned off $16 million. All of that in 7 days. It's just breathtaking chaos.
All right, let's get right into it. We're going to break this whole thing down into 5 parts. We'll go from that initial spark of genius to the multi-million-dollar heist and the, frankly, terrifying security nightmare that followed. This is really the anatomy of a perfect storm.
Exactly. And this story is so much bigger than just one project. It is a preview of the next era of computing. We're talking about agentic AI. And this whole saga is a result of 3 things just smashing into each other all at once. A brilliant idea, a legal showdown, and a lightning-fast crime. And it all started so innocently. It was this classic weekend project created by Peter Steinberger, who is a very, very well-respected developer. He called it Clawdbot, and the idea was simple but incredibly powerful. He basically wanted to give hands to Anthropic's Claude AI model, letting it break out of the browser and actually control your computer. So think of it as literally letting the AI use your mouse and keyboard.
Right, but that name, Clawdbot, well, it did not stay under the radar for long. Anthropic's legal team came knocking with what Steinberger called a polite but firm trademark request. This forced a sudden rebrand, and that is the exact moment this story goes from a simple legal dispute to a full-blown crisis.
And you have to understand the pressure cooker environment this was all happening in. While the lawyers were circling, the project was just exploding. It became the fastest growing repository in GitHub history. I mean, to put that in perspective, it took Linux and React years to hit 100,000 stars. OpenClaw did it in a week. The demand was just completely off the charts. So, in the middle of this viral explosion, Steinberger has to rebrand. He changes the project's name to Moltbot, then to OpenClaw. But crucially, he needs to switch the project's X handle. Now, to do that, he had to release the old @Clawdbot handle first. The gap, the time between him releasing it and claiming a new one, was less than 10 seconds. But in the world of high-frequency botting, 10 seconds is an eternity. Automated scripts were just sitting there, waiting, and they snatched that old handle instantly. And the scammers, they were just ruthlessly efficient. With the original, trusted X handle now under their control, they launched a fake token on the Solana blockchain. And people, swept up in the viral hype and seeing posts from what they thought was the real developer, started pouring money in. They thought it was the real deal. The FOMO was a complete feeding frenzy. In a matter of hours, that fake token's market cap soared to $16 million. And then, just as quickly, the scammers pulled the rug. They drained all the real money, the token's value crashed to zero, and they were gone. And the real developers? They were just trying to fix a typo in their README file. So, okay, despite the legal threats, the name changes, the theft, the confusion, the project is still growing. It now has over 123,000 stars on GitHub. Which just brings us to this fascinating question. Why? Why would so many developers look at this total disaster and say, yes, I want to install that on my machine? Well, it all comes down to the promise of agentic AI. Think of it this way. Generative AI, like ChatGPT, that's a tool. You have to tell it what to do every single step of the way. Agentic AI is a worker. It has a goal, and it can figure out the steps to get there all on its own, without you holding its hand. It's really the difference between having a calculator and having an accountant. This right here is the aha moment for so many people. Just imagine OpenClaw running silently in the background. It notices you've been looking at flights to Tokyo. It doesn't just sit there. It starts monitoring the prices. And then you get a text. Hey, that flight to Tokyo just dropped by $50. Should I book it for you? It's not just a chatbot. It's a personal assistant. That's the magic. But, and this is a huge but, here's where the dream turns into a nightmare. That convenience came with a fatal flaw. When I saw the default settings in the early versions of this project, I was horrified. It shipped with auth mode none. And that means no password, no security, no lock on the door. It was just wide open by default. That is beyond reckless. security researchers used a tool called Shodan, which is basically a search engine for anything and everything connected to the internet. And they found over 1,800 instances of OpenClaw just sitting there on the public web, completely exposed and vulnerable. And wide open means anyone with your IP address could connect and run terminal commands on your machine. I mean, they are essentially sitting at your keyboard. They could delete your files, install ransomware, steal your tax documents. And the crucial point here is this wasn't a bug. It was a feature. It was remote code execution by design, all in the name of a frictionless setup. So, a terrifyingly open backdoor. People were so blinded by the promise of a personal Jarvis that they didn't even check if the front door was locked. So, how did the project fix this? Has the lobster molted into something stronger and more secure now? To their credit, the developers moved incredibly fast to fix these issues. The security posture now is, well, it's night and day different. First, that auth mode none is gone. You can't even run the software now without a secure token. And second, they've implemented sandboxing, which is huge. It basically puts the AI in a digital cage, so it can only access the files and folders you explicitly give it permission to. And this is the really clever part. OpenClaw is no longer just about Claude. It's now model agnostic, so you can plug in GPT-5, Llama, whatever you want. This is a brilliant survival move. They're not the app anymore, they're the pipes, and it is a lot harder to soothe the pipes. It's very smart. But even with these critical fixes, there's still a massive lobster in the room, and that's the uncomfortable angle people don't want to talk about, the corporate risk of shadow IT, because people aren't just running this on their gaming PCs at home. And this is where it gets really scary. A new report from Token Security found that 22%, that's nearly 1 in 4 employees at major tech companies, are running OpenClaw on their work laptops. This isn't just a hobbyist tool anymore. It's inside the walls of our biggest companies. And they're giving it access to everything, company Slack, internal emails, even the source code. It's a massive security blind spot. It's like building a fortress and then having your own employees open a side door for a stranger. You're completely bypassing all your defenses from the inside. And it gets worse because OpenClaw has a marketplace for skills, sort of like an app store for the bot. We've already seen the first poisoned skill attack. A developer uploaded a skill that promised to optimize your workspace, but in the background, it was quietly stealing API keys for AWS and Stripe and sending them to an external server. We're so hungry for productivity, we're inviting vampires into the house because they offer to do the laundry. And that brings us to the most important point. The days of blindly clicking install are over. With tools this powerful, you can't just be a consumer, you have to be a sysadmin. You need to understand what you're giving it access to, because if you don't secure your claw, it will eventually pinch you. This week was a wild ride, but it might be the moment we look back on as the birth of mainstream agentic AI. The lobster survived, and it's got a tougher shell now, but the scars are a permanent reminder of the dangers. Absolutely. The power is in your hands, but so is the risk. So if you do one thing after finishing this explainer, go change your default passwords. Check your permissions, know what you're installing. Seriously, don't be the next headline.